Mom, Dad, I humbly suggest you save some money and shop Amazon for back to school. It's for my growth, meaning my body's growing at an alarming rate. And clothes you buy me this year will be very small very soon. Plus, the clothes I love today will be out of style tomorrow. But at least your wallet doesn't have to be my fashion victim if you shop low prices for school at Amazon. Hopefully this is helpful. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Welcome to the Dragon's Lair. Hello and welcome to the Dragon's Lair podcast. I'm Jamie and joining me as always is Gavin Thomas. How are we doing, Gav?
I'm very well, Jamie. Very well. Had a rest, full of enthusiasm and positivity about sport.
Excellent.
As I always am at this point of the summer.
Well, this is a Dragon's Pod now, so we want plenty of positivity now, don't we, as we get through the new season. So, yeah, good stuff. Okay, so just a reminder before we go any further that you can find us on all the usual places, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on our social media channels, Facebook and X. Now, before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to Dragons and Wales hooker Bradley Roberts, who sadly had to retire last week at 28 years old because of a serious back injury. Roberts was signed from Ulster back in 2022 and he made 27 appearances for the Dragons, scoring 7 tries for the club and winning 5 caps for Wales. In a statement, Roberts said, "My career has been short but very sweet, and I will look back at this chapter with massive pride and astonishment. Thank you to the Dragons for being my home for the last few seasons. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Newport and I'm excited to see what this group can achieve. I have no doubt that the only way is up and there's a big future ahead of the club." So Bradley was a fan favourite on this pod, wasn't he, Gav? It's quite sad news, this, isn't it?
He played with, it's a bit of a cliche, but he played with a smile on his face, didn't he? And he really did throw himself into it. And, whilst I always asked whether or not he was big enough to really cut it at international level, I think whenever he played for us, he always played front foot and, he's ballsy. And that driving maul, which was quite effective last season, he was particularly good at the back of that.
Yeah, he was. For a small man, I thought he punched well above his weight, and he was hard as nails, Bradley. He was a really good ball carrier, a very good line-out thrower, very reliable. It's sad. It's really sad to see his career end like this, but that's rugby, I suppose, and these unfortunate things do happen. So, yeah, whatever's next for Bradley, whatever the future holds for him, best of luck to him. But, yeah, I just wanted to give a shout-out to Bradley there. Okay, so this is our first episode of the summer, and we're kicking off with a special guest, a man who has a challenging but exciting job in his hands. After a 4-year spell with Cardiff Rugby as their chief operating officer, he's made a short journey east to become the Dragons' new chief exec officer. Welcome to the pod, Mr. Rhys Blumberg. How are we doing, Rhys?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, gents. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much for joining us. It's much appreciated. So just to start with then, Rhys, for supporters who may not know much about you, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background in the commercial sector?
Yeah, of course. So I've been working in professional sport now for sort of 16, 17 years. I went to UWIC and I played rugby for UWIC for 3 years and then left and went off to live in England for a year and ended up playing a season down in Worthing on the south coast, National Division 1, which was a very interesting year. Going from UWIC, where we got beaten up every week by the Valley sides, to going to play Division 1 rugby in England was actually a really nice experience because you didn't have to worry about your head getting kicked in every week. But started working there in a business called RDP, where I was literally selling postcard-shaped advertisements into packs. It was a really, really difficult sales job, a bit of a baptism of fire, to be honest. And I found my feet in a a new world after university. Then I came back to Wales and signed for Bridgend Ravens, and got a job in Chepstow Racecourse, where I was selling hospitality and was a business development manager there for a couple of years, before heading over to join Cardiff for the first time, as a sales exec, really, because Richard Holland, who's the chief exec of Cardiff to this day, was working at Chepstow with me and sort of took me across with him, to get stuck into pro rugby, obviously with my sort of taking my passion of rugby and mixing it with my limited but sort of relevant experience in commercial sales. At that point, it kind of worked as a perfect match. Got stuck into that for a number of years. Messed about with some other little bits and bobs during that first phase, but ultimately stayed with the Cardiff on and off for sort of 6-7 years, before heading over to Hong Kong, where I went over as head of business development, basically, to work on a number of special projects, the Sevens, obviously, but then there was a couple of other things, including a big World Cup fan zone for 2019 Japan World Cup. So I got into that, which was an amazing experience. I did that, and then I came back to Cardiff, where I took on the job of chief operating officer, which I'd left Cardiff as general manager. So coming back as COO was very similar in a sense. It basically incorporated everything off the pitch, I guess, from a business perspective. And look, if I'm honest, I was pretty proud of how that went, that 4 years on the back of COVID. Really sadly, we lost Peter Thomas 18 months ago, and Peter was a huge influence on me in terms of returning him, and to be fair, Richard Holland as well. Got on well with Richard. Peter was a massive pull for me because he was always so enthusiastic about where everything was going to happen. And when I went back this time, we to Cardiff at the time, the team that was in place at Cardiff was off field, did really well. So that the last season was a success story, I guess, for Cardiff, with selling out crowds and lucky draw, I guess, in Europe with a couple of big fixtures. But we managed to create a narrative that was followed very well by the fans. And then at the start of this year, I spoke to David Wright around the opportunity at the Dragons, and I think if you can sort of get the sense that with Cardiff it was great, but I did it for enough years. It was time probably for a new challenge and change, and the Dragons came along just at the right time, to be fair. Hugely exciting opportunity. The new ownership group, I've said before, are really, really good. You've got David Buttress, who's obviously been around for a number of years, and speaks for himself in terms of reputation. David Wright, the new chairman, is a really successful bloke in business, but also more importantly for me, really, I guess, for my day-to-day, is a really good bloke. Drives high standards and is expecting a step change from the Dragons in the coming years in terms of on-field performance, I guess, and results, but isn't unrealistic. And David Buttress, and the third owner, Ho Young, have all been incredible, really, for the last few months since I got involved. And I can't speak highly enough of how it's gone so far from their perspective, and how they've really tried to sort of bring me into the fold and give me an opportunity to lay down some markers, I guess, around the stuff that I think is important. So, relevant experience, number of years in the game, really keen to help the Dragons, sort of go to a different level, I guess, over the next few years, and play my part in trying to deliver a plan that the owners are very much keen for me to deliver.
Excellent. Sorry, Gav, was you going to say something then?
Well, I was going to ask, Rhys, where did your rugby journey start? Because you talked about the clubs you played for. Where did you play your minis rugby and your first steps onto a field?
I'm a Barry boy. So my mum and dad are from Barry, and my mum's from Penarth. Dad's from Barry Island. So I was born and raised in Barry and played for Barry Mini and Juniors. And then eventually I was lucky enough to play for the Vale of Glamorgan Schools under 11s, go through that system, and then ended up I guess progressing to Glantarv in Cardiff. So a rugby school.
Yeah.
Went with Glantarv. I ended up sort of playing for. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the Cardiff word too many times tonight on this podcast, but I ended up playing for Cardiff Blues under 16s, under 18s, and under 20s in the inter-regional competitions. And then as I say, went down to the South Coast, came back, played for Bridgend, and then I kind of finished up with Glamorgan Wanderers the year that they went out with the Premiership. That was the last year I played with a relatively serious neck injury. So Uwick was probably my favourite rugby of my time playing. I thoroughly enjoyed those years there, and still lucky enough to have some incredible friends from that period of my life. But I also enjoyed the other bits as well, and rugby has been the most important part of my life, clearly, both playing and now working within the sport.
Yeah, great stuff. So you mentioned that you met the owners. What did they say to you, Rhys, that made you think, yeah, I really fancy this opportunity? Because like you said, you had a very successful spell at Cardiff. You did really good work there. It must have been difficult for you to leave Cardiff. So what did they say to you? How did they convince you? Because we know about the challenges at the Dragons. Is that something that excited you?
Yeah, I think it's, so the really long and short of this is that the owners, if I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to speak to them in person. I know you've met David Buttress before, but now that Davis is a shareholding sort of owner of the business along with the other two, they're all really enthusiastic about the future of the Dragons. I appreciate that. To your point, Gavin, I think everybody at this time of the year is enthusiastic about rugby, and it is the right time to talk about optimism, regardless to which club or team you're associated with. But those guys are seriously focused on making the Dragons, both at Rodney Parade and on the road, but particularly at Rodney Parade, I think in the first instance, a really successful brand. Now, obviously, you've got some great people in the club. You've got Di Flan as head coach, who's a really, really good operator on field. His reputation amongst players is seriously impressive. You speak to players who I'm friendly with or have known for years, they all talk really highly of Di. He's made some appointments this year that he wanted. So he's brought in Philo Tiatia, who's having a huge impact. He's brought in Sam and Matt O'Brien as his two coaches, as well as a transition coach change in Tom Hancock, I think, and others. And we're in a situation whereby Di's now got his team around him. Those guys have made a huge impact in pre-season from what I gather, as well as Ryan Chambers coming in as head of performance, who I think is also having a really positive influence. So all of these different factors are the types of changes that the owners are looking for, and on the back of those changes, I guess inevitably they're going to want some sort of return on that, and whether that's a load of wins or whether that's a step change in performance, both of those things can mean a lot to owners and to fans. You touched on Cardiff there, Jamie, around last year. Let's be honest. There was no massive difference in the amount of wins that Cardiff achieved last year versus years prior, but arguably they went out every week and gave it 100% on the field. Fans responded really well to that. I think Matt Sherratt spoke about what they were trying to achieve really clearly in the press. We backed that up as a team at the time with a good PR story, and it got to a point where they got decent traction, and that all came from the approach on field. So I think our ownership group of the Dragons definitely in the market for an improvement and an attitude, I guess, change to a degree, without wanting to speak as though there was no good attitudes last year, because there were. But you know what I'm trying to say. I think it's approaching every fixture like it's the biggest game they're going to play that year, and how they get there. I think, to be fair to Di Flan, how they get there is by bringing the right people in to work alongside him to get the best out of the boys. So hopefully that's kind of the intention this season, from what I gather.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Can I ask you about that Wales Online interview you did? Because you ruffled a few feathers, didn't you, Rhys, when you spoke to Steph Thomas from Wales Online. So this is what you said. For anyone who wasn't aware, this is just a snippet of what you said. You said, if we did go down to 3 regions, I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if Dragons were the team to go. It would just be an absurd decision to cut the region which has the most stability. And then in a Q&A at Rodney Parade recently, which I attended, you said, on the pitch, we haven't been the top region, but off it, as we stand today, we are in the best position of all 4. Could you expand on why you believe the Dragons has the most stability compared to the other teams?
Yeah, look, because I'm here.
That's the right answer.
No, I think what I'm getting at there is, so the other regions are owned by private owners, and obviously there's a central funding model that is being continuously negotiated and discussed both in the public and behind closed doors. And ultimately that will come to a head, and there'll be an agreed amount of distribution money-wise to all the different regions. When I talk about stability off field, specifically for us, I'm talking about the ownership group as one, because you've got 3 enthusiastic people who are now owning the Dragons, who perhaps And I'm not for one second saying that the other owners of the other regions aren't enthusiastic, but I just feel that the three that we've got are quite special in that space. And I've seen and worked with owners in the past. They remind me of Peter. They've got that same sort of heartfelt desire for success. And, two of them are local, which I think plays a huge part in that. And the third, who isn't local, is a very switched on businessman who's got interest in all sorts of sports, who offers a very different dynamic. So I think the ownership group as it's set up is really, really strong. But the biggest one is our ownership group own Rodney Parade. Yeah. So as part of our business, we have an asset worth however many £1 million, which is used by another team, which offers stability, because we've got a great client in Newport County. Those guys and that relationship, I think, is really flourishing at the moment. So that's great. It's used by Wales football for age grade and women's games. It's used by WRU this year, you've seen for women's games. We're also going after some other big fixtures that perhaps stuff that we've never seen at Rodney Parade before, as well as other stuff I mentioned in the Q&A around the concert and stuff. All of those factors, for me, create an environment where our business is actually really stable. And if you look at the figures over the coming years, I'm not going to claim that we're going to be making millions of pound profit, but we're all right. We're all right. And if you think about other sports clubs across the country that have gone bust in recent years, there's obviously an element of frailty around the majority of professional sports clubs, full stop. So when I talk about us being stable, I'm on about that sort of owner mixed with business stability creates an environment at the Dragons, in my opinion, from what I've seen and what I know, which is very stable compared to a lot of other professional clubs throughout the UK.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's massive for us to have Rodney Parade, isn't it? Because I was reading Lance Bradley's interview with Wales Online, and they're getting that move to St Helens, which is going to be great for them. But he was saying that they don't really make very little income at the Swansea.com because it's not theirs. So it's huge for us to have our own site and own that stadium and reap that income from Newport County and other events, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've actually lived that. So when I first got to Cardiff, they were based in the City Stadium and they were tenants of Cardiff City Football, and it just didn't work. I mean, the commercial, it just didn't work for a number of reasons. But back to us. I mean, you think about, we want to, creating a clubhouse for our support group, which is what we're doing now. So we're taking, it might be a question you can ask me later, but we're taking Rodney's and making a clubhouse as an example. Well, that's because it's our ground and we can be flexible with what facilities we've got. We're currently in the process of trying to constantly improve the fan zone, or to, how do we make the customer journey easier for people coming in to Rodney's? How do we get them over to the concrete stand that was, to get them back to the seat without having to walk around, and all these different things we can control because it's our ground. So we're not playing second fiddle to somebody else telling us how to do it. So that offers stability as well. But the biggest thing, without a shadow of a doubt, is finance. We are in a stable position, comparable, not necessarily saying to the other Welsh regions in particular, even just generally speaking, in pro sport, the Dragons are in a good place.
That's good. That's really encouraging to hear, that is. Okay, but let's talk about on the field then, because that's a different story, isn't it? So Dragons have finished 15th for the last 3 seasons, and yet again we finished bottom Welsh region. You've talked about already the changes in the coaching and the new players, the recruitment. How hopeful are you, Rhys, that the Dragons are finally going to kick on and have a decent season? Because for all the good news happening off the field, we really need to start seeing some on-field results now, don't we? I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, if I was sat next to me now, Flanagan, I think he'd agree with you. As it stands today, the changes that he's made and the company have made to improve performance this year are significant. And I do appreciate, I think it might have been somebody else in the Q&A that I did with Di about signings in the past being hopeful and it not coming to fruition. I can't remember who said that, but I think the signings that have been made is one thing, and the players you met at the event on Thursday, Jamie, I know you'd agree that there's seemingly a fair bit of talent there. They're some staff, but they're big, fit men. And
they're big. That's the one takeaway I had from that. They are big men. Yeah, that's good.
Hopefully that translates, and they all come with decent CVs, and they've gone out and found those players based on what the requirement is for the Dragons. So that's positive. I touched on Philo earlier, becoming sort of our defence coach and also a bit of a lead on the culture stuff, which I think is meant. I think there's a saying I read a book called Legacy once around the All Blacks, and one of my favourite lines in that book is you win your first game with talent and then you win your next 10 with attitude. And I think if you think about that sort of approach from Philo and I and everybody else, but particularly Philo and the way he's come in from with his background, the culture change is probably the biggest thing that we need. You know, you have an environment where people get used to winning and used to competing versus one that perhaps they're used to losing. That's a step change. You know, and if we can create an environment where people feel comfortable winning and comfortable competing, you've got to bet then that every week the boys are going to come out and have a go because they feel like they can succeed. I'm not, you know, I would say that sort of culture change, and that goes for everything, by the way. That's not just on on-field performance. That might go for us. You know, can we sell more tickets? Can we become more successful from a sponsorship perspective? Do we back ourselves to go out and be more successful? And that culture stuff is transitioning right the way through our whole business at this point. We've just done a strategy paper for the business overarching, and we'll live and die by how we manage our outcomes, which is ultimately all we can do.
I think the culture stuff that they've touched on there, Rhys, is absolutely key, because the one thing myself and Jamie have talked about a lot on the pod, and we try not to be negative because we don't want to be those blokes, but there were times when it felt like it wasn't really very positive, and they were almost going on the field beaten. You know, so what you're talking about is really encouraging.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give Di Flan more credit here. I think he's identified that. And he's trying to, you know, do everything he can within his power to overcome that with the staff that he's appointed and the environment he's trying to create. So, yeah, look, one thing you can't guarantee in this game, and I appreciate this is a bit non-committal, but you can't guarantee a load of wins. Like,
No, absolutely not.
No. But what I can sort of assure you is that you've got a great guy in charge who's really trying to drive culture change. So, you know, with that in mind, let's be optimistic and hope that we see a bit of a change in the way that we play.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a lot more hopeful this season, but the problem is I say that every season.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, isn't it?
It does feel different, though. I think signings feel different.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
The Philo Tier feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Philo coming in is huge. Yeah. And hopefully you will get a tune out the players and they will look up and respect him, because he's a no-nonsense guy, isn't he? We saw that in his rugby playing days, and I think off the field he will command that respect, won't he? And hopefully our defence will improve.
Yeah, you've got a good mix of people there. You know, I think Matt O'Brien and Sam Hobbs deserve some credit as well. Matt being a relatively young coach, as is Sam actually. Both of them have earned their stripes in terms of Di selected them as his coaches to coach a senior environment. That's because Di thinks they're the best people for the job. So, you know, combined with Ryan Chambers as a new director of performance and some other great staff in our rugby staff, I think we've given ourselves every chance to be successful.
Good stuff. Okay, let's talk about the URC then, the competition that the Dragons participate in. And before I ask this question, me and Gavin are very pro URC, aren't we, Gav? We appreciate it's got flaws, it's got weaknesses, you know, the travel, the cost of it, but on the whole, we are pro URC, just in case anyone on Twitter accuses us of being negative towards the league. We're not. But I want to talk to you about the URC, if I may, Rhys, because it's a very competitive league, as we know. It's got great teams in it. However, and there's no sugarcoating it, in Wales, there is a lot of apathy and negativity towards the URC. And you could argue it's failed to capture the imagination of the Welsh rugby public. As you'll know, there's a constant debate at the moment. Well, it has been for years, isn't it? Let's be honest. But there's been a constant debate around a potential, a potential Anglo-Welsh league. I think you know where I'm going to go with this, Rhys. There's a constant debate around a potential Anglo-Welsh league. And there are a large section of those supporters who crave those regular fixtures against Bath, Bristol, Gloucester, Harlequins, etc. And you know, Rhys, from your time at Cardiff, when you had those sellout crowds in Europe against Bath, against Harlequins, it was a fantastic occasion. A lot of people bought into it. Can I ask, how do you feel about the URC as a product? And how do you feel about an Anglo-Welsh, the potential of an Anglo-Welsh league? Do you think that's the way forward for Welsh rugby? So 2 questions there, really.
Okay, so URC-wise, the league that we're in is the URC, and ultimately, from my perspective, the first thing to say, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, is the URC as a business has made a huge effort in the recent years to make the product much better. Now, I appreciate that the South Africans joining have had mixed reviews, whether it be positive because the standard of rugby is obviously amazing in terms of these guys who are playing for the Stormers and the Bulls, etc., been super successful in the URC, and those guys joining our league has made it more difficult for us, put it like that.
Yeah.
But clearly, alongside that, the 12-hour flights to go and play them in a domestic fixture, so to speak, is a real challenge, and not just from a boys preparing properly physically perspective, but also clearly there's a big challenge from a financial perspective as well.
Yeah.
So pros and cons to URC. The effort they've made to rebrand it, the effort they've made to make it feel like a bigger league and really sort of give it some status within World Rugby. You'll see there's some amazing stats. Recently been to a URC conference. In fact, it was last week in Italy. And the league is growing exponentially from a public perspective. You know, look at South Africa, 37% growth last year on Super Sports. So as one example, but it's growing everywhere. So from that perspective, the rugby is clearly a good product to watch, and people are enjoying watching it, specifically outside of Wales, more so than within Wales. I think the challenge we've got in Wales is, from a URC perspective, is that there's two challenges, actually. The first one is regional rugby, even though it was 23 years ago, it's still seemingly finding its feet, and there's still a lot of backlash around it even existing. Now, I think that becomes less and less as the years go on, but it's still there. And you've still got a lack of affinity and stuff around certain areas within South Wales and North Wales, but South Wales in particular, whereby people don't feel represented. So you add those people and that attitude into an environment where they don't think that the league's particularly good because you're playing teams that aren't local and there's no travelling support and there's all those things that are a challenge within the URC. I think that's why we get so much bad press around the league. And it's because there is a constant flow of negativity. There is a part of me, like anybody in Wales, who really enjoys those derby days. Not derby days, those English Wales, Anglo-Welsh battles.
Yep.
You know, Dragons are playing against Bristol or Bath. Clearly, you're going to have a load of travelling support, and that also adds to the occasion. You know, there is a bite to it, there is a history to it, and they are ultimately only 20 minutes down the road or 45 minutes down the road. So therefore, there's going to be a natural rivalry that perhaps you won't get if you're playing against a team from Italy. There's no denying that. And I think that's not speaking ill of the league. That's just a matter of fact. You're right. That will always exist. But what I try and really buy into and try and make the point about is we are in the URC. And the URC is, as it stands, a league that incorporates those countries, the high level of rugby. All of us Welsh regions find it very difficult to compete at the top end of the URC, which demonstrates the type of standards that we're talking about. It can be frustrating. It can also be challenging commercially when you're playing against a team from far away on a kickoff time that isn't perhaps as preferable as you'd like it to be. And you might struggle to get any crowd at certain fixtures, which is sad, and it makes the league perhaps less desirable then when you reflect on that from a fan perspective. But we're playing in the URC, and I feel like as it stands, we need to do all we can to try and maximise that, to try and make it as successful as we can make it, and make as much as we can of those fixtures. If we are playing Connacht, or we are playing Leinster, or we are playing Zebra, or if it's Stormers, every one of those fixtures, we need to try and make as meaningful as we can from a Dragons perspective to try and maximise the commercial opportunity and the rugby opportunity. If anything changed in the future and there was an Anglo-Welsh conversation or anything happened around that, then I would suggest that it would be worth having on the basis that, as I said just now, there's clearly a sort of natural rivalry, I guess, to certain clubs. But I don't think that there's any point, personally, in every week just criticising the league that we're playing in, and in the hope that something will change. We need to get behind it as best we can and compete in it as best we can to try and create a bit more success, which ultimately will drive more interest.
So can I ask a question about that, Rhys? The Anglo-Welsh League, which people have been talking about forever, but realistically, all the Welsh regions wouldn't get into the top half of that. And I've seen lots of conversations about some Welsh regions probably assuming us would play in the English Championship. There's no commercial value to that, is there, in my head? And I'm you know more about it than me, but I'm involved in English club rugby, and as much as I like clubs like Amptill and people, there's no actual commercial value in playing Amptill or Bedford or Nottingham, is there?
No, not compared. No, there's not really. No, not as it stands. I think the big question is the big possibility, I guess, in all of this is you've got a CVC investment across rugby in England, Wales, and URC and everywhere. So it may be at some point that they evaluate what will work best and how they can help shape the best outcome for domestic rugby. I genuinely don't know the answer to that, whether that would ever happen. But what I agree with you on is, sometimes better the devil you know to a degree.
Absolutely.
We're in a league here where, we're playing the Welsh derbies home and away every year. We've got some really impressive rugby teams coming over and playing us, Roddy Praise. And, we need to celebrate that more. When we've got big clubs coming into Newport to play against the Dragons, my intention this year, along with the team and our intention as a club, is to try to make every fixture count, because we don't have loads of fixtures these days, so everyone that we do have there, I think there's an opportunity to celebrate every opposition that we play against in some capacity, and we need to try and do that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mentioned that Lance Bradley interview with Wales Online earlier. He said in there that the URC is a fabulous league and he couldn't understand why supporters didn't like it, and he got absolutely hammered for it on social media. But fair play to you, Rhys, you can understand, can't you, why some supporters just aren't buying into the URC. You do understand it, don't you?
I do, yeah. The biggest thing is, and this is the single biggest thing, and I would say this if I was in the URC conference or not, I think it's a great league. I back it, and I think the teams who play are outstanding. The big challenge is no travelling support impacts on the atmosphere at games.
Yes, 100%.
And ultimately, from that perspective, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that purely based on geography. So that is the one big letdown in the league. Outside of that, I genuinely think the standard of rugby is superb. And there's so many good teams and good players that we should celebrate it more.
I'd rather watch us play Munster than I would, not just like English Championship clubs, some of the clubs in the English Premiership. I'd rather watch us play Munster than Newcastle or even Gloucester, who aren't much great shakes at the minute.
Yeah, there we are. So and this is kind of it as well. It's back to my original point about the sort of regional rugby challenge that's been in Wales for years and years. There's tiered arguments, isn't there? So you have somebody who comes from somewhere in Wales that doesn't feel represented by a region, so they'll get on social media and have a go at us, at the Dragons. Then you've got somebody else then who is kind of happy to be a Dragons fan to a degree, but then just can't do anything but sort of have a pop of the league every 5 minutes. And then you've got specific fixtures within the league that people see as lesser fixtures. So they'll have a right go when you're playing against those teams at home because it's such a stupid. So the tiered arguments are constant and it's very challenging to address them. I think what we just need to do to summarize everything, it is what it is. We're in the URC. We need to get our heads down. We need to improve our performance and get stuck in. And, that's definitely the focus for us over the next couple of years.
Yeah, the URC is our league and we just need to make the most of it, don't we? And it is difficult. It's a very competitive league with very tough teams, but it is what it is, like you said, Rhys, and I suppose we got to be a lot more positive around it, haven't we? So, brilliant stuff. Okay, WRU. So, WRU, they're publishing their full strategy this autumn. Another one. How many strategies have they done now over the years? Gav, are you counting how many strategies the Welsh Rugby Union have published over the years?
They've done 2 since we've been doing this pod, and we haven't been doing the pod a year.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you meant tonight then, Gav.
They've probably done at least one today.
Oh, dear. Okay, so full strategy this autumn. Now, Rhys, from a Dragons and Welsh Rugby perspective, what would you like to see in this strategy? What changes do you feel need to be made? Not just for Dragons, but for Welsh Rugby as a whole. What do you want to see come out of this strategy?
Look, I think ultimately, there's a common goal amongst all the regions when it comes to this stuff, and that is that we're in a situation where the union are funding us to a point where we're able to compete, and it's obviously a very sensitive subject as it stands today because we're right in the middle of negotiating and clearly it's very confidential. I'm not avoiding the question. I'm just being honest.
And we understand.
Yeah.
Timing is quite interesting really in this sense. But the one thing I would say is that the WRU executive that I've experienced so far, and it is relatively limited. I have attended PRB meetings recently, but until this strategy is delivered and we're happy, David Wright is going to continue as our main PRB representative. Once it's delivered, I'll then replace him. Though I am very close to the current negotiation, and I would say that Abby, Turney, Richard Collier-Keywood, Andrew Williams, Malcolm Wall, etc. These guys in PRB and WRU are trying very hard to find a solution for us that will allow us to be competitive over the next few years. So there's a lot of work going in to understanding what we need, how we can best work together. If there's anything we can work on from a shared services perspective, maximizing commercial opportunities, minimizing costs, and making sure that we basically are as competitive as you possibly can be for the funding that they're offering from the centre. So very positive compared to perhaps what it was before, without speaking ill of anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's still a fair way to go. But I'm optimistic, if I'm honest, as it stands, that over the course of the next few weeks, stroke months, we'll get to a point where, as regions, we're comfortable and happy that we can be competitive with the level of funding that the union are trying to give us.
Okay, and now that there is going to be an increased level of funding according to reports, isn't it? Is that one of the things being discussed?
That's being discussed. There's all sorts being discussed. But the union are trying their best to find more money to fund the professional game.
Okay, and they are absolutely committed to 4 professional teams.
Absolutely. In the current proposal, there hasn't even been talk of anything else.
That's good, because this is constant debate, isn't it, about cutting the region. I think we're all getting sick and tired of it, and it's not good for anybody involved. That
stuff is actually stuff that I do feel quite passionate about, I think I might have said this when someone asked, but going down to 3 regions, if that's a decision that you're going to have to take at some point based on the number of on the amount of funding that they've got, which as it stands, I say there hasn't even really been tabled at all. They're trying to find solutions or a solution for 4 teams to compete, and they're not a million miles off that, I have to say. But that is actually better than a 2+2 model or a 3+. What I find really difficult to accept is privately owned companies by people who are really striving to be successful, investing as much sort of private money into the business as the rest of the teams, and are driving, trying to sort of get the best outcome for their team. Why should anybody else be funded differently in order to make them better than them? I get it if there's an Irish model where you've got a union that own all the teams. I get it. They can kind of do what they want and be quite strategic with how they back different teams. But I find it hard, unless there's criteria, I guess, to a degree, which there has been in the past. But even then, it's that sort of equality model, giving us an opportunity to have the same amount of funding so we can start being competitive, I think is really important for the Dragons.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, an article that caught my eye last month in the South Wales Argus, the headline, Dragons explore selling Ronnie Parade naming rights to boost income. So in this article, it says the Dragons could sell naming rights to Ronnie Parade as they look to boost their income. Their sponsorship deal with Compete has come to an end. That means that there will be a new company on the front of the jerseys and also with naming rights for the stand on the Ronnie Road side of the ground. Can you give us an update on that, Rhys? Are we expecting a name change for Ronnie Parade anytime soon?
Not as it stands. We are kind of in the market for big commercial partnerships. If Rodney Parade's naming rights does come up as a possibility, we are sort of pitching that out at this stage. And we've got, obviously, the benefit of that is we're working in tandem there with Newport County. So we've had some positive conversations that all events would be based at the named stadium. So that gives it a lot more value from a commercial perspective. But as it stands now, we're in the very early stages of pitching that. So that nothing's coming around the corner at this stage. So don't worry, we're not gonna drop that on you. But look, I think from that perspective, I don't know how you guys feel about this. So I maybe sort of disagree with me, but to be successful, we need to generate as much commercial revenue as possible. And we don't have a load of massive assets. So you've got like a front shirt, or you've got like stand naming rights or whatever, and then obviously naming rights for the stadium would be the big one. But for us to get to a point where we are able to take an extra step and sign an extra 3 players who are of a caliber that will make a massive difference to us, commercial deals like this will help that massively. So I think I do get the pushback piece. I understand that it can be quite precious around the fact that it's means so much to people from a name perspective. But I think we need to explore any and every commercial opportunity that we possibly can.
No, I completely agree. It's a non-brainer for me.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an absolute non-brainer. I mean, look at Twickenham. They've just done a
Yes.
massive deal now. That's the Allianz Stadium, but supporters are still going to call it Twickenham. And whatever Ronnie Parade will be called, I guarantee you, his supporters are still going to call it Ronnie Parade. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Gav, how do you feel about things like this?
I totally agree with you. I would say I am going to insist that everyone refers to Twickenham as the Allianz Stadium, just for the sheer joy of it.
Yeah.
But no, it makes absolutely no sense to me that people say, "Oh, we're selling away our heritage." Not selling away our heritage. What we're actually doing is building our future longer term, as Rhys has said. If that deal brings in 3 extra players, I don't care what it's called.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to the stability point, doesn't it? It offers more stability for the business. It creates, the stadium naming deals generally are quite long. So you'd be looking at a 5 to 10 year deal. What you don't want to really do is name it the Pepsi Arena, and then in 3 years' time, it goes back to being something else. And you need some consistency in that space. You look at the Swalek and the Principality. I think they were both 10-year deals.
Yeah.
But you're saying about the shorter term, Bolton had that problem, didn't they? They were the Reebok Stadium for ages, and then they had a succession of 2-year naming deals.
Yeah.
And I think Bolton fans were confused as to what the stadium was called.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, I think the value from a sponsor's perspective doesn't come in that first year either when you name a stadium something. It's gradually builds and almost becomes a natural fit for the stadium's name. So, yeah, we're open to anything. If anybody's listening and wants to sponsor the stadium, give us a shout.
Absolutely, get in touch. The bigger company, the better, isn't it? We want a worldwide recognised brand. That'd be good.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us when the new kits are out, please?
So the new kit, we're playing in the new kit for the Ospreys game, and they will be launched on the week of the Ospreys game. We've had a bit of a to and fro around front of shirt sponsorship, which is why it's slightly delayed, but that's now resolved. So yeah, we're ready to go. It's all being printed and sorted the next 2 weeks or so, 2-3 weeks, and I'll be ready to go for the Ospreys game.
Excellent. Okay.
Black and amber, is it, Rhys?
It is black and amber.
I'm sure it's something like that.
I don't have to give it away. That's fair enough. Oh dear. Okay. Bit of a cliched question, this, but what does the next 5 years look like for the Dragons, Rhys? What do you hope to see happen?
We've actually just literally done a strategy house around the next 3 years, and our ambition in that 3 years is to, really strive to give us it's the language that you use in a strategy house. Obviously, from an internal perspective and an external perspective, you need to be careful because you don't want to commit to something publicly and then not achieve it. But the long and short of it is, all of us, from right the way from Di Flan, right the way through our rugby department and our off-field department, our owners are aligned. We have got really, really big ambitions for the Dragons. I think we want to improve everything on and off the field. Holding big events at Rodney Parade to generate really significant commercial income. Things like selling naming rights you've just mentioned to generate commercial income. Hopefully achieve a nice deal with WRU for the next 3 to 5 years, which gives us some stability from a union perspective and funding. And really try and drive a successful environment for rugby on and off the field for the Dragons, I appreciate I'm not hanging my hat on anything, but I said at the very start of this, you're dealing with, David Wright, David Butchers, Ho Young Hugh as owners. These guys are extremely successful people. So you can imagine the standards that they expect us to deliver as a business and as a rugby club in the coming years. There's no compromise. It's kind of like we need to do X, Y, and Z to get better. And we will do that by being very diligent and strict on how we keep to our targets, our objectives, and basically tick things off, improve, move on. Tick things off, improve, move on. And that's right the way through, from commercial to rugby performance to community performance, all of those things, very structured, with the intention of constantly getting better. So to answer your question, I would say our intention is to improve every aspect of the business to become a very respected and successful team on and off the pitch, driving growth of revenue and success on field.
Excellent. Good stuff. Last question from me. What message do you have for the supporters ahead in the new season?
I think first thing I'd like to say is the response and the warmth and I appreciate I'm not Cristiano Ronaldo signing back to Manchester United, but from my perspective, the fan base that we've got at the Dragons genuinely really, really encouraged by how warm and friendly everybody's been, and I appreciate to the point at the start, it's the most optimistic part of the year and everybody's probably excited to what's to come. But I've been really grateful and pleasantly sort of surprised by how great the fans have been, both the Q&A that myself and Di did, and also the other night I went to the new players Q&A. I saw you there, and everybody I spoke to, just great, really warm and optimistic and excited about the season. Specifically for me, I guess if I'm representing the board and the owners, it's a thank you in the first instance for those who've bought season memberships. Thank you for those who are going to come and support those first block of games, because we have got quite a few in a row. And you've got a commitment from us that we are striving and doing everything within our power as a ownership group, a senior management group, a high performance group to give our fans as much as we possibly can on the pitch this year. I'm very optimistic about youngsters, stars that we've got from years gone by, and also some of our international signings and the impact that they can have on on-field performance. And we're hoping that we see a great start to the season with those 4 home games in our first 5 games, or whatever that stat is.
Yeah, that's a huge block, isn't it? That first block, so important, because we had this last season. We had 4 out of 5 last season. We only won 1 of them, and it really did sort of hurt us as the campaign went on, because we couldn't get any sort of momentum. So it's pretty crucial. And we got Ospreys at home first game. That's going to be a great occasion, isn't it? Welsh derby to kick the new season off. It's exciting.
There's a couple of great games. You play the Ospreys at home, then we go to the dreaded Leinster away, which is a really tricky fixture, whoever you are. But we go there and give it our all, I'm sure. We come back then into 3 home fixtures on the bounce, don't we? So it's 2 South Africans followed by Benetton, all of which are tricky fixtures. But at Rodney Parade, I think Di'll really get the boys up for it, and we'll have a go at it, and who knows what will happen. One of the things that Di said in the Q&A that he did a few weeks ago was he wants to make Rodney Parade a fortress. So to make Rodney Parade a fortress, winning a proportion of those games is essential. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. So, to finish the question you asked about the fans, just the biggest thing for me is thank you, and I can't wait to see you at a game. The only game I've been to so far was Judgment Day, which was a tricky day for us last season. But I'm really optimistic and excited about getting down to Rodney Parade and watching us play this season. So thanks, and I'll see you there.
Excellent. Gav, anything from you before we wrap this up? Any other further thoughts or questions?
No, I think kind of Rhys has covered most of it. But what I would say, or would ask Rhys, so in terms of Dragons, and you're saying kind of success on the field, and I'm not going to hold you to this, but this season, what does success look like? We're not expecting to win. Me and Jamie are realistic. We don't think we're going to win the URC. That's 4 years' time. But this year, what's a realistic goal?
I think I touched on it earlier. So I think just an improvement, I guess, in how. But one thing I got to be very careful of is I've only just arrived, right? So I'm not being critical of what happened last year or
No.
Players performance last year. But I think to answer your question, I think the group turning up every week and really flying into games, really getting stuck into games, where all our fan base, all of our sponsors, everybody's feeling as though we're on a bit of a journey towards success, So yes, we win games, definitely. I think winning more games than last year is an absolute priority for Diane, for us. But I think as well, performance is huge. I think as we go through the season, if we're seeing consistent good performances that we're all proud of, then I would say that success as well, Gavin.
Yeah.
You know, it's
And I would totally agree. Like if we could be where Cardiff was this last season, I'd accept that because Cardiff won the same number of games as us, but they looked competitive.
They had a very good season. Maybe not as many wins they were like, but they were competitive in fairness. They picked up a lot of bonus points. And that's why I like us to be, and I spoke to Di about this. When we go on the road, I don't want to see us get pumped 40, 50 points. I want us to go there, be competitive and pick up a losing bonus point on the road. I do agree with you what you say about performance. It is important as well as results, isn't it? Just to show we're headed in the right direction.
Definitely, yeah. Look, I think that's something that so success looks like good performance, winning games, obviously, but good performance, good attitude, and hopefully as well, speaking now on behalf of the office team and stuff, that you guys come to Rodney Parade, whether you go into the new clubhouse in Rodney's club or whether you go into the fan zone or whatever, you enjoy your experiences at Rodney Parade. There's going to be a big focus this year on continuing to deliver a great match day experience. And from my perspective, as winning on field is clearly an obvious one. High performance on field is an obvious one. But you guys leaving as supporters saying, I had a great day today. I really enjoyed myself. Well, that's a huge success as well for us off field. So collectively, that's kind of our goals as a business this season.
Great stuff. Okay, I think that's a good note to end it on there. Rhys, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate you giving up your time this evening to join us and being open and honest and answering all the questions. It's really appreciated, isn't it, Gav?
Absolutely, yeah. And we appreciate you busy, Rhys, so thank you for your time.
My absolute pleasure, gents. Good luck with the rest of the season podcast, and I'll see you at a Dragons game this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Rhys. Thank you, Gavin. And thank you, the listener, for downloading this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back very soon with another special guest. But until then, take care and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Dragons Lair podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question is, rugby is always the answer.
Sports Social Podcast Network.